Welcome, everyone. Today we are going to read the lesson, Bepin Choudhury's Lapse of Memory. We shall also have a bit of explanation on some of the words at the end of the reading. Please have your textbook and pencil with you and read along. I want you to listen to the pronunciations, but the Indian names of places, things, and persons should be overlooked because the software is not able to pronounce the names correctly. Underline the words you're not familiar with, write them down in your notebook, find out the meanings from a dictionary, and write them down in your notebook, following the format that I've shown you in first term. So, let's start.
In this story, Bipin Babu goes nearly crazy because he cannot recollect his stay at Ranchi. He has never been to Ranchi, he insists, though there are many witnesses to the contrary. What is this suspense all about? Every Monday, on his way back from work, Bipin Choudhury would drop in at Kalakaran's in New Market to buy books, crime stories, ghost stories and thrillers. He had to buy at least 5 at a time to last him through the week. He lived alone, was not a good mixer, had few friends, and didn't like spending time in idle chat. Today, at Kalakaran's, Bipin Babu had the feeling that someone was observing him from close quarters. He turned round and found himself looking at a round-faced, meek-looking man who now broke into a smile. "I don't suppose you recognize me. Have we met before?" asked Bipin Babu. The man looked greatly surprised. "We met every day for a whole week. I arranged for a car to take you to the Choudhury Falls. In 1958. In Ranchi. My name is Perimal Ghose." Ranchi? Now Bipin Babu realized that it was not he, but this man who was making a mistake. Bipin Babu had never been to Ranchi. He had been at the point of going several times, but never made it. He smiled and said, "Do you know who I am?" The man raised his eyebrows, bit his tongue and said, "Do I know you?" Who doesn't know Bipin Choudhury? Bipin Babu now turned towards the bookshelves and said, "Still you're making a mistake. One often does. I've never been to Ranchi." The man now laughed aloud. "What are you saying, Mr. Choudhury? You had a fall in Choudhury and cut your right knee. I brought you iodine. I had fixed up a car for you to go to Netterhead the next day, but you couldn't because of the pain in the knee. Can't you recall anything? Someone else you know was also in Ranchi at that time. Mr. Dinesh Mukherjee. You stayed in a bungalow. You said you didn't like hotel food and would prefer to have your meals cooked by a Borki. Mr. Mukherjee stayed with his sister. You had a big argument about the moon landing, remember? I'll tell you more. You always carried a bag with your books in it on your side, seeing trips. Am I right or not? Bipin Babu spoke quietly, his eyes still on the books. Which month in 58 are you talking about? The man said, October. No, sir, said Bipin Babu. I spent Puya in 58 with a friend in Camper. You're making a mistake. Good day. But the man didn't go, nor did he stop talking. Very strange. One evening, I had tea with you in a veranda of your bungalow. You spoke about your family. You said you had no children, and that you had lost your wife 10 years ago. Your only brother had died insane, which is why you didn't want to visit the mental hospital in Ranchi. When Bipin Babu had paid for the books and was leaving the shop, the man was still looking at him in utter disbelief. Bipin Babu's car was safely parked in Bertram Street by the Lighthouse Cinema. He told the driver as he got into the car, "Just drive by the Ganga, we'll use Sitram." Driving up the Strand Road, Bipin Babu regretted having paid so much attention to the intruder. He had never been to Ranchi, no question about it. It was inconceivable that he should forget such an incident, which took place only 6 or 7 years ago. He had an excellent memory. Unless Bipin Babu's head reeled. Was he losing his mind? But how could that be? He was working daily in his office. It was a big firm, and he was doing a responsible job. He wasn't aware of anything ever going seriously wrong. Only today he spoke for half an hour at an important meeting. And yet the man knew a great deal about him. How? He even seemed to know some intimate details. The bag of books, wife's death, brother's insanity. The only mistake was about his having gone to Ranchi. Not a mistake, a deliberate lie. In a 58, during the Pujas, he was in Campa at his friend Haridas Baggy's place. All Bipin Babu had to do was write to know. There was no way of writing to Haridas. Bipin Babu suddenly remembered that Haridas had left with his wife for Japan some weeks ago, and he didn't have his address. But where was the need for proof? He himself was fully aware that he hadn't been to Ranchi, and that was that. The river breeze was bracing, and yet a slight discomfort lingered in Bipin Babu's mind. Round Hastings, Bipin Babu decided to roll up his trousers and take a look at his right knee. There was the mark of an old inch-long cut. It was impossible to tell when the injury had occurred. Had he never had a fall as a boy and cut his knee? He tried to recall such an incident, but couldn't. Then Bipin Babu suddenly thought of Dinesh Mukherjee. The man had said that Dinesh was in Ranchi at the same time. The best thing surely would be to ask him. He lived quite near in Benininden Street. What about going right now? But then, if he had really never been to Ranchi, what would Dinesh think if Bipin Babu asked for a confirmation? He would probably conclude Bipin Babu was going nuts. No, it would be ridiculous to ask him. And he knew how ruthless Dinesh's sarcasm could be. Sipping a cold drink in his air-conditioned living room, Bipin Babu felt at ease again. Such a nuisance. Just because they have nothing else to do, they go about getting into other people's hair. After dinner, snuggling in bed with one of the new thrillers, Bipin Babu forgot all about the man in Newmarket. Next day, in the office, Bipin Babu noticed that with every passing hour, the previous day's encounter was occupying more and more of his mind. If the man knew so much about Bipin Babu, how could he make such a mistake about the Ranchi trip? Just before lunch, Bipin Babu decided to ring up Dinesh Mukherjee. It was better to settle the question over the phone. At least the embarrassment on his face wouldn't show. 235616. Bipin Babu dialed the number. "Hello, is that Dinesh? This is Bipin here. Well, what's the news? I just wanted to find out if you recalled an incident which took place in 58. 58. What incident? Were you in Calcutta right through that year? That's the first thing I've got to know. Wait just a minute. 58. Just let me check in my diary." For a minute, there was silence. Bipin Babu could feel that his heartbeat had gone up. He was sweating a little. "Hello. Yes, I've got it. I've been out twice." "Where?" "Once in February nearby to Krishnanagar to a nephew's wedding. And then But you'd know about this one. The trip to Ranki. You were there too. That's all. But what's all this sleuthing about? No. I just wanted to anyway. Thanks. Bipin Babu slammed the receiver down and gripped his head with his hands. He felt his head swimming. A chill seemed to spread over his body. There were sandwiches in his tiffin box, but he didn't eat them. He had lost his appetite. After lunchtime, Bipin Babu realized that he couldn't possibly carry on sitting at his desk and working. This had never happened in the 25 years he had been with the firm. He had a reputation for being a tireless, conscientious worker. But today his head was in a whirl. Back home at 2:30, Bipin Babu lay down in bed and tried to gather his wits together. He knew that it was possible to lose one's memory through an injury in the head, but he didn't know of a single instance of someone remembering everything except one particular incident, and a fairly recent and significant one at that. He had always wanted to go to Ranki, to have gone there, done things, and not to remember was something utterly impossible. At 7:30, Bipin Babu's servant came and announced, "Chuni Babu, sir, says it's very important." Bipin Babu knew what Chuni had come for. Chunilal had been at school with him. He'd been having a rough time lately and had been coming to see him about a job. Bipin Babu knew it was not possible to do anything for him, and in fact told him so. But Chuni kept turning up like a bad penny. Bipin Babu sent word that not only was it not possible for him to see Chuni now, but not in several weeks. But as soon as the servant stepped out of the room, it struck Bipin Babu that Chuni might remember something about the 58 trip. There was no harm in asking him. Bipin Babu hurried down the stairs and into the living room. Chuni was about to leave, but seeing Bipin Babu appear, he turned round hopefully. Bipin Babu didn't beat about the bush. "Listen, Chuni, I want to ask you something. You have a good memory, and you've been seeing me off and on for a long time. Just throw your mind back and tell me, did I go to Ranchi in 58? Chuni said, 58. It must have been 58. Or was it 59? You're sure that I did go to Ranchi? Chuni's look of amazement was not unmixed with worry. Do you mean you have doubts about having gone at all? Did I go? Do you remember clearly? Chuni sat down on the sofa, fixed Bipin Babu with a long, hard stare, and said, "Bipin, have you taken to drugs or something? As far as I know, you had a clean record where such things were concerned. I know that old friendships don't mean much to you, but at least you had a good memory. You can't really mean that you've forgotten about the Ranchi trip." Bipin Babu had to turn away from Chuni's incredulous stare. "Do you remember what my last job was?" asked Chunilal. "Of course. You worked in a travel agency. You remember that, and you don't remember that it was I who fixed up your railway booking for Ranchi. I went to the station to see you off. One of the fans in your compartment was not working. I got an electrician to fix it. Have you forgotten everything? Whatever is the matter with you? You don't look too well, you know." Bipin Babu sighed and shook his head. "I've been working too hard," he said at last. "That must be the reason." Must see about consulting a specialist. Doubtless, it was Bepin's condition which made Chunila leave without mentioning anything about a job. Parish Chanda was a young physician with a pair of bright eyes and a sharp nose. He became thoughtful when he heard about Bepin Babu's symptoms. Look, Dr. Chanda, said Bepin Babu desperately, you must cure me of this horrible illness. I can't tell you how it's affecting my work. Dr. Chanda shook his head. You know what, Mr. Choudhury, he said. I've never had to deal with a case such as yours. Frankly, this is quite outside my field of experience. But I have one suggestion. I don't know if it'll work, but it's worth a try. It can do no harm. Bepin Babu leaned forward anxiously. As far as I can make out, said Dr. Chanda, and I think you're of the same opinion, you must have been to Ranchi, but due to some unknown reason, the entire episode has slipped out of your mind. What I suggest is that you go to Ranchi once again. The sight of the place may remind you of your trip. This is not impossible. More than that I cannot do at the moment. I'm prescribing a nerve tonic and a tranquilizer. Sleep is essential, or the symptoms will get more pronounced. Bepin Babu felt somewhat better the next morning. After breakfast, he rang up his office, gave some instructions, and then procured a first-class ticket for Ranchi for the same evening. Getting off the train at Ranchi next morning, he realized at once that he had never been there before. He came out of the station, took a taxi and drove around the town for a while. He realized that the streets, the buildings, the hotels, the bazaars, the Morabadi Hill, with none of these had he the slightest acquaintance. Would a trip to the Choudhury Falls help? He didn't believe so, but at the same time, he didn't wish to leave with the feeling that he hadn't tried enough. So he arranged for a car and left for Choudhury in the afternoon. At 5 o'clock the same afternoon in Choudhury, two Gujarati gentlemen from a group of picnickers discovered Bepin Babu lying unconscious beside a boulder. When he came round, the first thing Bepin Babu said was, I'm finished. There's no hope left. Next morning, Bepin Babu was back in Calcutta. He realized that there was truly no hope for him. Soon he would lose everything, his will to work, his confidence, his ability, his balance of mind. Was he going to end up in the asylum yet? Bepin Babu couldn't think any more. Back home, he rang up Dr. Chanda and asked him to come over. Then, after a shower, he got into bed with an ice bag clamped on his head. Just then the servant brought him a letter which someone had left in the letter box. A greenish envelope with his name in red ink on it. Above the name, it said urgent and confidential. In spite of his condition, Bepin Babu had a feeling that he ought to go through the letter. He tore open the envelope and took out the letter. This is what he read. Dear Bepin, I had no idea that affluence would bring about the kind of change in you that it has done. Was it so difficult for you to help out an old friend down on his luck? I have no money, so my resources are limited. What I have is imagination, a part of which I used in retribution of your unfeeling behavior. Well, you'll be all right again now. A novel I've written is being considered by a publisher. If he likes it enough, It'll see me through the next few months. Yours, Chunilal. When Dr. Chanda came, Bipin Babu said, I'm fine. It all came back as soon as I got off the train at Ranchi. A unique case, said Dr. Chanda. I shall certainly write about it in a medical journal. The reason why I sent for you, said Bipin Babu, is that I have a pain in the hip from a fall I had in Ranchi. If you could prescribe a painkiller.
I hope you find the robotic voice interesting rather than boring or monotonous. Anyway, let me quickly wrap up. I am going to explain some words and concepts which I find important. Now, in page 60, I want you to underline the words good mixer. Good mixer. Page 60. Now, mixer is a noun and good is an adjective. Good mixer will have to be used as a noun, and it means one who is not comfortable being with other people. That means you feel, if you are not a good mixer, you feel uneasy when people are around you. You do not know how to have a conversation with them or speak to them. All right? And in the same page, I want you to underline close quarters. Close quarters. Now, this is almost the same as in the structure because close is an adjective and quarters is a noun. So both words act as a noun. And it is a formal way of saying a physical short distance. The words are noun and they also could be used as an adjective. If you're going to use it as a noun, you must always use the preposition at before it. All right? Okay, let's move on to the next word. Turn to page 61. And I want you to look at the word fixed up. Fixed up. It's a phrasal verb. And if it is a verb, then it's going to be either transitive or intransitive. Remember, in class 7, I've told you, and we have already learned what is a transitive verb and what is not intransitive verb, and that too in class 6. I hope you've already learned that with Mizomoy as well. A transitive verb needs an object, and an intransitive verb does not need an object. So, fixed up basically means arrange. So you can say, you can use it in a sentence like, I fixed up a car for you to travel. I fixed up a meeting for you to say the things that you want to say. That is how you use the phrasal verb. Now, I want you to turn to page 63 and look for the word lingered. It's in the second form. The first form is linger without an ed. And I first want you to understand that it's a verb and an intransitive verb. So it needs to be without an object, and it means remain. Okay, remain. Now, how do you use that in a sentence? Well, if you're going to use it in a sentence, it must do without an object. So whenever I hear the word linger, I always think back of this pop band, Michael Lansrock. The sentence that comes into my mind when I hear the word linger is, they linger in the shadow. Well, this is from a song, So it means that the essence of that person still stay. It's kind of poetic, so it does not explain that very much. But then let me try to give you a better example. The scent of his perfume lingered. The scent of him lingered in my nose. Okay, I think that's just about. If you want to find out more, then you have Google. Google will always do everything for you, right? Okay, now let's turn to page 64. Sarcasm. Sarcasm. I first want you to understand that this is a noun, and then sarcasm is mostly intended as a joke or to hurt other people. Now, a good example will be when you listen to your friend trying to sing beautifully, but he instead sings like a wailing cat. So you want to make fun of him by telling him, "Hey buddy, your voice is like a sweet nightingale singing." So it means that you are being sarcastic and your comment was sarcasm. Alright? Okay, now let's turn to page 65 and look for the word the firm or firm, F-I-R-M, firm. I want you to know that it is a noun and it should be understood as a business or a company where people works. Okay, not certainly a government institution, but it can be a government institution, but most of the time it isn't. So it is a place where people works. It is a place where people may do business. All right. Now for the last part, I want you to turn to page 67, and having and gone can last for about 1 hour of explanation. Combination of two verbs. All right. And if I have to use it in a sentence, I will be using it like this. Having had my lunch, I decided to not drink tea. Let me phrase that again. Having had my lunch, I decided to not drink tea. Now, what does that mean? Now, it simply means that I already had my lunch, so I decided to not drink tea. Okay? It speaks about the past, and then the other clause also speaks about the past. So we use it when we want to speak about the past. So you can use in a sentence like having seen the doctor, I went home. Having seen the doctor, I went home. So it's like saying I have seen the doctor, or I had seen the doctor, so for that reason I went home. Since I've already seen the doctor, I decided to go home. So whenever you see the word having, and if there is a verb next to it, that verb will be in its third form. Okay? I know you will have lots of questions about this, but then for now, let's call it enough. Okay? So that will be all for today. Please learn your lesson and try to understand the story. So I guess I'll see you in the next video. Take care.